This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for Avoid the Maze. Now, we're not going to avoid the subject today, but when I talk about avoiding the maze, it means that if you're experiencing something, sometimes you get to a roadblock. You're not really sure if it's real or not real. And so you just stand there staring at this blank wall. But the reality of it is, you need to take a step back, take a deep breath, and keep following a path. Make it a path that is good for you. We're not talking about good for anybody else. My guest today is Christina Foxwell, and the subject she talks about is domestic violence. And some of us have experienced it, some worse than others. Um, and it's not all about the Hollywood movies, because the Hollywood movies sometimes get it right, but not always.
Mm.
So, Christina, welcome to Avoid the Maze. And I asked you before we started, why do you want to talk about this subject? Because it can be heart wrenching.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you for having me on the show. And hello to everyone. Whew, I think we have to talk about the subjects no one wants to talk about. In my work, I do a lot of coaching, and often we only see the output of a behavior, right? And when you said this to me, there's a key thing. We have to talk about shame. We have to actually walk through it in order to be free. But the thing is, we don't want to because it's uncomfortable and it's painful. And shame says there's something about me that's bad. I'm bad. And those are the domestic violence messages that get thumped into us. Sorry for that word. Be it emotionally, physically, we get treated as if we're bad. There's something about us that's not worthy of love. And if we don't talk about these things, we can't heal.
You know, as I told you, I went through a form of domestic violence. It was mostly verbal.
Yeah.
Um, and it always was, well, you didn't understand what I said. I didn't mean it like that. Um, you're stupid. So, of course, you're going to take it the wrong way. And I remember calling my parents, and this is back in the days when calling long distance cost a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would call collect, so they would turn around and call me back. And as soon as I would say something to my mother or father, they would say, "You made your bed, you have to
Right.
sleep in it."
Mm.
And, I kept saying, "But he tells me I'm fat. He tells me I'm ugly. He tells me I'm stupid. He tells me I'm not a good mother. He tells me if I do one more thing, he's going to have me put in a psych ward." I said, "I need some support." But I
Mm.
realized why my parents weren't giving me support, because they lived 6, 7 hours away. They never saw this in our relationship. And I
Mm.
always called in a panic. Never did I try to call just to talk about it. Um,
Mm.
do I wish they would have listened to me? Absolutely. They finally did. But those words I kept hearing,
Mm.
uh, they were more hurtful than if he would have slapped me around.
You know, so I experienced mental and verbal abuse, a little bit of physical. And I agree that when the mind is so tortured by what you're told you are, and when you're gaslit, it's almost like you're in a torture chamber
Uh,
um, with no way out. And you've got two choices. You either believe what you're being told about yourself in order to keep the peace, and even then, the peace isn't kept. um, or you somehow try to escape the control. But what happened to me was, even when I left the control, because I had it for about 7 years, I couldn't function without it.
Interesting.
So my story, that's why I talk about domestic violence, because I try to pretend I was so tough, I made it through. Okay. But the toughness was just the external shell I created so I wouldn't feel. And eventually my trauma caught up with me. And that's why we have to talk about it, to your point. But when we ask for help and we're in it, we either don't ask for help from the people that can help us because we're so ashamed, or when we ask for help because we seem to have had this perfect life, no one believes us. Because generally partners like that come across as being amazing to other people.
Right.
And then people either think there's something wrong with you, like they're telling you there's something wrong with you, or you actually are questioning your own sanity because you've been gaslit so many times. You don't know what is reality and what is not reality. That's how you feel. Does that sound like it happened to you like that,
Oh,
Karen?
absolutely. And the interesting part was that when where we were living, it was his hometown.
Yeah.
So our friends were his friends who became my friends.
Yeah.
And so I was being very careful because they knew him first.
Yeah.
And I didn't know who I could trust and who I couldn't trust. And what was interesting was that even though I didn't get the support I needed from my parents initially, I called my oldest brother, who I didn't know he was going through marital issues, had nothing to do with domestic violence, but it was just marital issues. And when I
Yeah.
called and I said something to him, he goes, "Well, it's about time you shared this with somebody." So as a male, he had
Boom.
picked up on this. And I think for my parents, and I don't know, I never asked, but I think they felt, well, you got married, you love him, you got to make the most of it. And, that was nice if I could have, and maybe if I would have worked on it differently, but it was just so hurtful that when we finally did divorce, and the first time I was asked out, I said to the guy who asked me out, I said, "Why do you want to go out with me? I'm fat, I'm ugly, and I'm stupid." And he
Mm-hmm.
goes, am I talking to the same person?
Mm.
And it was like, well, yeah. And he was very specific. He said, so you're fat. Can you tell me how much you weigh? And I said, well, you don't ask a woman that. And he said, no, 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 no. If you're fat, I want to know. And I think I told him, at least I told him my dress size or something. He said, well, that's not fat.
Mm.
And he said, ugly. Um, whose words are those? He said, go look in the mirror and then come back to the phone and tell me if you're really ugly. And it
Mm.
was the first time somebody was questioning
Your
those
thoughts.
voices in my head.
Your thoughts. 100%. And he was a brave man.
Yes. And he's remained my friend all these years. Didn't
Beautiful.
marry him, didn't have a relationship with him, but the best of friends. And that's what it took. It took somebody who could see it, and then my brother who could see it as well. So, but you said that you went through this for 7 years.
Mm.
When did you start questioning yourself if you really were going through this?
So I'll share with you. We started dating when I was 17. And that's when it started. But it was slow trickles. And the control was there all along the way. And initially I fought it. But I came from a religious home. You don't sleep with someone or have sex with someone and then don't marry them. My dad was a Pentecostal pastor. You don't do that. He grew up in the same church community as us. So He was a riot squad policeman in apartheid, so he saw vicious things. It's not an excuse, but I have to call out truth in many directions. I didn't have a voice because I was molested at the age of 5, and my parents hushed me because of the ministry. So I didn't know I could use my voice to create boundaries to protect me. Are you hearing? I'm painting this beautiful picture, right? All I wanted was to be loved, to show that I'm not dirty or bad.
Right.
So when I met this man who could control me, he created a space for me that he would give me love conditionally. And I was in that process of being able to exchange love for worth. I'll give you my self-worth if you give me love. You see, it's easy to say we have an abuser. It's not easy to say. Let me rephrase that. It is hard to say I have an abuser, because I asked myself, how did I let that happen? But letting it happen isn't a now thing. It's a journey thing. Because
do you think, like some other women who I've talked to who have been through these situations, that this was something you had to go through to really find your self-worth and your love?
Yes, I look back at my story and I could be angry. But had I not given my worth to him, I would have given it to someone else. That's my story, please. That's not everyone's story. That's my story. Okay. And all I wanted to do was to be seen and to be loved and to feel better about me, but hoping someone would make me feel better about me. And what I realized, and only years later, truthfully, I mean, I was really angry with him. The affairs he had behind my back and all. I mean, I've written a book around all of this, but it's about healing. It's not about the story of violence. It's about healing. Because I put it all away. As I said, I showed the world how tough I was. I treated men really, really badly until I met my now husband. And he saw me and loved me. And as our marriage progressed, I started doing the same things with him, which was giving him my worth in order to trade love. And I sat with a therapist, and he said to me, "You're so good. You teach corporates," because you see, corporate world is very structured. You treat corporates how to give feedback to each other and how to use their voice, but you're not using your voice at home. I was very angry with the therapist. I was like, grumble. And then I was like, yeah, I need to use my voice. How do I do that? How do I get enough courage to use my voice? Because my PTSD and trauma was, if you use your voice, the backlash will be tremendous. So you never use your voice. The shaming and the punishment will be tremendous. So you don't use your voice. But I had to use my voice to save my marriage now, to save me. And then I had to...
And that's, I learned that, but I learned it the hard way, because I would argue with him when he would tell me these things. And it did make it worse, because there were more threats that sounded more plausible. And like I said, I didn't know who to go to, if I could go to anybody. At one point, I suggested we go to couples counseling. And
that becomes a tricky mess, doesn't it?
Yeah. And he said to me, "You can go, but there's nothing wrong with me." And I said, "Okay, why don't you come and tell them all the things that are wrong with me, so I can change?" And obviously he didn't want to do that, because for whatever reason, he wanted out. And the more I think about it, that's what it was. that he knew that I had a short fuse
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't going to take it for long.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I took it for about as long as you did. We were married all of 7 years. Um, we had a child who was 3 years old at the time that we separated and got divorced. Um, and some of those nasty words were used as our son was growing up.
Yeah.
But the interesting part, and I want people to understand this, I didn't try to change him,
No.
but there came a day in his life where he started to change, realizing what he had done, not knowing why he did it. And he told that to me on a phone conversation one day. It was probably 20 years after we were divorced. And I said, "Why are you telling me this now?" And he
Mm.
said, "Because I'm trying to heal." And I thought,
That is huge. That is huge.
yeah,
And I commend him for doing that. My first husband, who is also my second husband, he still won't acknowledge his part, and I won't fight him on it. But our daughter, who is now 27 and a mom of almost 2 kids, she's about to have my next grandchild. When he started doing the same with her, and I moved countries to start a new life, but he's tried to do the same with her, and she set a boundary in place because she'd been working with me, and she didn't talk to him for years. And then eventually, when my grandson was about to be born, because he kept phoning me. And I said, well, it's her choice. But I said to her, why don't you think about this? If you don't work through what's wrong and anything happens to your dad, you'll carry that with you. Why don't you just clear it for you? It's not about him. And she did. And she now works with him with boundaries. And I think he's learned a lesson differently. He's learned something which I'm not sure he'll own, but he almost lost something that he felt was precious for him. And he still doesn't like me, but that's okay. I don't need to be liked or loved by him. I love me, and that's the most important thing. And I have a beautiful family, and he has a beautiful family. So I release him with love, because harboring anger, I hurt.
well, and many of us do harbor it for a long time. Some hold on to it because they think that they need to. Um, I harbored a lot of anger for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And especially because when our son turned 11 years old, he took him into the court and where he could say, "Hey, I want to live with my dad." And
Okay.
my son did, because dad offered a lot more money, a lot more extras than I could. And I didn't initially think of that as abuse, but it became abusive because he would refuse
Control.
to let my son talk to me. He would refuse to let him come to visit. Um, and I didn't want to lose my son's love and respect. And so I tried not to say anything bad about his dad. I just let him know that he was loved. He could come anytime he wanted. He could call me anytime he wanted. Um, and it took him until he was an adult to finally say, "Thank you for doing that," because I could have learned to hate you because of the hate in the house.
Mm.
We can't change other people.
Cannot.
And that's sometimes what all of us try to do if we are facing domestic abuse.
Absolutely.
And I knew I couldn't change him. And I lived with it until one day I just said, "I've had enough." And it was like that simple saying it, but it certainly wasn't simple healing.
Oh, no. Which is where shame comes in again. See, I have to walk through that story. I use this analogy. I've got to walk through the story and seed it with love, recognizing I did the best I could in that moment with what I had, and recognizing that's all they have. That's
So
all they
where
have.
did you get that wisdom from?
So I'll share with you where the damn wall broke for me. So I went through this abuse, and then I had various partners because I was struggling. I've been engaged more times than I wanted to tell you, and I've been married a few times, right? So I have the ability to navigate love, but not keep it. Remember, I already said I exchange worthiness
Right.
for love, right? But my now husband and I were together. My son from a previous relationship and then marriage was going through mental trauma, because I arrived here when he was 3 in Australia from South Africa, and my daughter was 10, 11. And so it was hard for the kids, and it was hard for me, but we settled in. But my son got bullied at school, and anyway, it escalated to the point where he was not going to school. So they sent us to family therapy, the state, the government, to see if they could integrate him back into school, and what was going on in the family dynamic. And I was a workaholic, because it was the only place where I could take care of my family without needing to have a man in my life. I didn't want to trust a man, even though I've got this beautiful husband, because I was let down so many times that all I could do was trust myself to be able to provide. And then, of course, enjoying the work I do, because it created a sense of satisfaction for me that I wasn't getting from my personal life, right? Anyway, I'm running this practice, the one that I own now. And I walked into the therapy room with suitcases. I had a town car waiting straight after. We had 1 hour, and then I was going to the airport, and I was flying away for a few days to deliver work. And the therapist watched me as I walked in, younger woman. We sat down. We started talking about the challenges. She looked up at me and she said, "Do you think you could work less?" Boom. It was like an atom bomb going off in that room, because I'm seeing my son struggle. I already feel like I'm not good enough. I'm not a good enough mother. And all I'm trying to do is provide. And when she said that, he piped up and went, "She does this for me." And gosh, I love him for that. So I had one of those moments. I looked at my husband, and it was quite traumatic. I said, "That man doesn't have to take care of me. He's got no responsibility to me and my children. I might be married to him, but he could leave me." And it was just awful stuff I said. But it was my pain just pouring out in that moment. She phoned me afterwards and said, "Christina, you have PTSD, and your son won't heal until you heal." I said, "So can you help me?" She said, "No, I'm a family therapist. That is not my job. You need to take control of this yourself and find a therapist and sort yourself out." I said, "But I'm a coach. Like, I coach Brene Brown's work. I do." She went, "I don't care if you're the president. I don't care what you know and who you know. It's time for you."
And we don't take that time. We bury ourselves.
Why would we?
Exactly.
We've been told we're not good enough.
Yeah.
Why would we spend time on something that is shame related for us? Why would we go and, I spoke to someone about this. So they said, "Why would I want to walk through that pain again?" And I have to say to you, it was excruciating. It was excruciating to open that door. It was excruciating to walk through that story. And it was excruciating to let it go. And then I was free. I sat with my therapist. He was an American man. He's still alive. He's an American man. He's a doctor of psychology. He sat with me. He said, "Right, Christina, what are we doing?" I said, "I just want to be free. I'm so tired. I've been carrying this for so long. I want to surrender. I can't do this anymore." think he thought I would commit suicide. And actually, as we started working through the shame, I felt overwhelmed. Because of this, I lost my church community. I got ostracized. People told me I should have prayed and he would change. I can't tell you the stuff people did and said to me. And so why would you want to go there? That felt even more scolding than the abuse I'd
Right.
received. And that's why people don't want to talk about this, because other people judge them. They judge them on their decisions, and then they compare and go, well, I stuck it out, Well, it's not about sticking it. This is not about how tough we can be. This is about the quality of our life and loving ourselves enough to know we're worth more than this.
I agree with you that when we talk about our situations, it's not about one-upping somebody.
No.
And I sometimes find that that's what people think it is. One of the reasons I do this podcast and we talk about difficult subjects is life is full of difficulty. And
Okay.
we all do have a choice to accept the difficulty or work through it or walk away from it. And women for many, many centuries haven't been as strong as women are able to be because they were told, that's not your part in society. It's his part to be strong. I know when I finally walked away from my marriage, I shamed myself because I was waiting for everybody else to do it.
So I did it first.
Yep. And all those things I did to myself before anybody else did. And it wasn't until I met my current husband about 3 years later that I knew what a really nice man was about.
Fine.
And there's still days that every once in a while he'll say something and I'll think, oh my God, he's turning into, but he's not. I have to realize it. No, that's not what he said. But my brain still has that history.
Of course, your trauma goes off, your trigger goes off. Karen, when those triggers go off for us, our defense mechanism kicks in, our behaviors change, and then we create the future we really don't want.
Yep.
And over the last 3 years, I've been practicing mental fitness work, which is about mindfulness, presence, and rewriting my story with love. And I tell you, the freedom is unbelievable. It is just, I know when I'm going into trauma now, I recognize my thoughts. I can start working through my reflection of letting go of negative emotions and moving into a present state where I'm wise. Do you know how much effort it took? But do you know how wonderful it is?
But you had to do it to get to where you are today and to get through tomorrow.
Work.
Yeah.
I had to do the work. Absolutely. And you know what? I am not allowing shame to take away the love I need to give me so that I can love others.
So tell me about the book, because there are individuals who write a book and, oh, it's my story. But lately I'm hearing the book isn't so much about my story. It's about the situation that so many of us face.
Yeah.
So what was it like when you sat down and said, okay, I'm going to write?
So this is my 4th book, but the first 2 were more metaphors. So people think they're kid stories, which I'm okay with. And I did have beautiful artist illustrations. And then the 3rd one was a coaching guide, which was part of the journey. This one was needed to be told. And I wanted people to relate to it because we've all got a story. And I broke my book into 3 parts because, of course, why would I try and write it just normally? I have to do it. So the first part is an analogy and a metaphor, because I work with metaphors of a glass angel. That all these perfect angels are so perfect. And the wind takes this angel and thrashes her to the ground, and she shatters. And she sees her brokenness. But what she does is she ties her brokenness to her, because all glass angels do that break. And the pain of her brokenness pierces her every day to remind her she's broken. And so she starts fighting and surviving and creating this life, but she becomes a warrior to protect herself and to be somebody. She has to fight to be somebody. And every time she might hit a milestone or get somewhere, it doesn't make the pain go away. It still doesn't make her feel whole. And one night she wakes up and she walks into the desert, and sitting up next to a fire is another angel. This angel is beautiful. Actually, this angel's name is Ava, which is love. And this angel asks her to sit down. She's a bit wary. Do I fight this person or this angel, or do I sit? But she feels peace, so she sits down. And he tells her a story of how he was a broken angel. And how he gives her this name, Praelia, which was this unbelievable warrior that they had in this place where they lived. But he disappeared and nobody knew what happened to him. And he said, well, I was always Ava, but my pain turned me into Praelia, and I am Ava. And the only way I became who I always was to release, to forgive, to love, and to love my story, to love me. And he teaches her how to be an alchemist. So he teaches her how to release the pain. And as she does that, golden strands leave her heart and collect all her broken pieces, and her wings are back together. And she's called to walk this earth to help other angels find their alchemy, because we're not broken. We're just on a journey. We just have to find a way to be free. And that's how I start my story. And then I share components of my life, of the journey. And I could have written probably a novel. And people have asked me, why did you not go further into your pain? And I was like, because it's not about the pain. It's about the healing.
And when we settle on the pain, and I was in a group session last night, and we were talking about, just feeling good about ourselves. And I said, I can do that today, but growing up and almost to the age of 50, I really was my own worst enemy. I wanted to tell people something negative about me before they would say it, rather than say something positive about myself. And now it's totally turned around. But what turned it around was that I was working in corporate America, loved what I was doing, hated the culture. The culture was killing me. I went into a deep depression, and all of a sudden it dawned on me, I could be shameful for feeling the way I am, that I can barely get out of bed, that I can barely do my job, that I look at my husband and I wonder, why am I married to him? All these things. And instead I said, no, I'm going to accept for right now, I'm depressed because I've taken on too much. I haven't looked at that glass being half full. And I don't know when I'm going to, but that is my purpose now in life, to see that glass half full. And within a day, I contacted a doctor. Within a week, I was with a therapist, and it was like, I can cry now. I can get it out. And you know what? Maybe I didn't find the actual source, but I did find that I didn't want to hold on to all the sadness that was in my life, because I was creating mountains. And really It was just a piece of sand on the ground.
Karen, but this is the thing. When we are so connected to our pain, it's heavy.
Yep.
And it's not about ignoring our pain, because that's what we've been trying to do. Let's be real, right?
Yeah.
It's about accepting it for what it is.
Exactly.
See, acceptance is the gift. It's not about accepting the story of the negative thoughts. It's accepting the grief. It's accepting the loss. It's accepting that I feel pain. It's accepting that all of that still does not mean I am not good enough or I am not worthy of love. It means I accept that I have emotions and I'm a human being, and they are not
Absolutely.
good or bad. They just are. See, we try in our lives to say, this is good, this is bad. This is right, this is wrong. But I'm a human being that's so complex. And maybe I've got to accept that my life is beautiful, because I believe my life is beautiful. I believe that my story around domestic violence has brought me to this place where I have an amazing space to work to help people. It has turned me into who I am. It has helped me have my beautiful child. It has navigated me to a journey where I live in Australia, and I am, I have this, I can't even tell you, my life is so different. I have this beautiful little home. I've got 2 cats, of which one was screaming next to me just a few minutes ago. I have this wonderful space to be me, not to be what others said I wasn't, but just to be me, imperfectly beautiful. And see, that's the love.
And it's our purpose in life, is to be ourselves, to be
Totally.
authentic. And hopefully, these words are being heard by the younger generation, so they know that, bad things can happen, but nobody else is going to fix it other than ourselves. And it's tough, but
It is tough.
like you said, I'm where I'm supposed to be now. And what happened in the past,
Past.
sadly, was a learning experience.
Totally. It's past.
Yeah.
I can hold on to it and scream about it and fight it. Or I can look at it as a journey for me, learning for me. See, as I wrote these parts of my journey and my story, I was reflecting on Brene Brown saying we could rewrite our story. She said it years ago, but I was in so much pain that I didn't know how to do it. See, there's 2 things you've said. Firstly, be who we really are. We need to find who we really are. And so in my book, my last chapter, my last section, I talk about alchemy practices, and it's falling in love with who you really are. Who are you? I didn't know. All I knew is what I was told I am.
Right.
And there's a practice that we do in positive intelligence where we find this picture of ourselves as a little child, and we see that face, that innocent face with all the, and I have this face of this picture of me looking at my brother. I'm so cheeky, Karen. I'm cheeky and filled with love, and I've got freedom and energy and just kindness, and I know who I am. I'm her. I'm me. And I choose that every day.
So you mentioned positive intelligence, and for those who don't know what it is, you can Google it. But I just completed a 6-week positive
Shazad?
intelligence, and now
Yeah.
we are in group sessions, and it is so enlightening. I mentioned last night at group, I don't have a backpack on. And they looked at me and they said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Oh, some days I do." Yeah. But the majority of my days I don't. And I said, And I have to go back and say that the 6-week course, at first I hated it. I didn't understand it. I fought it, but I
Yeah.
stuck with it.
Good.
And I think that's part of the healing process, that
It is.
you don't have to give in immediately. But if you become mindful, you allow yourself to be aware, you stop judging everything you do.
It's
It's like,
mind blowing, actually.
it is. And to be sitting here last night and all of a sudden I just like moved my arms and I'm like, I said, ladies, I have to tell you, I'm not wearing a backpack anymore. And the excitement,
Yeah.
because now I have people who I'm working with who
Yes.
understand.
Yes.
And uh, it's a phenomenal program. And obviously that's part of your coaching, right?
Absolutely. So we've been running it here for about 2 years, and I coach it. I live it. I've gone through it 4 times. I run a cohort every week. So when one stops, another one starts. And I had all this healing. I just needed to go to that next stage. And I think positive intelligence helped me with that, because it gave me the courage to write my story. Because in one of the groups, one of the modules, as you go through the program, you've got to look at your life and you've got to consider the gift, the stories that were most difficult to navigate, and how do you turn it into a gift and opportunity. And all the work I'd done just came colliding into that moment. And that's when writing this book became real easy, because I'd written the analogy, but I never knew how to write the story.
And now it's out there for all of us to read.
It's out there. I want people to read it, because I've blended it with acceptance commitment therapy, positive intelligence, CBT, really just looked at it from different angles, and I worked it. As I wrote it, I released it.
Love it.
As I wrote it, I released it.
Tell us the name of the book and how we can find it.
Okay, so Karen, you're going to send me your address and I'm posting you a copy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I'll send you another copy so you can give a copy away.
Okay, we will do that as well.
How does that sound? Okay, so it's available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. It's called The Glass Angel, A Guide to Freedom, Growth, and Transformation, Unlocking Potential. And
now, for all of you listening, all the information regarding Christina will be in the show notes. So there's no excuse when you say, I want to reach out to her. I want to see her website. I want to hear everything that she has to say. You can do that. I also have to say, as a coach advocate, coaching is something that can be remarkable for all of us.
Absolutely.
I've been working with coaches now for the last 5 years, and I'm not the same person. And yet I didn't change so dramatically that my friends and my husband don't recognize me. They recognize the positivity in me. And, my fear was in the beginning that I was going to change and everybody was going to run away from me. But instead, what I have found is many of them have found a coach on their own, have made changes as well. And again, the differences that I see, they're just positive. It's not something that you can actually put your finger on, and makes for such a wonderful life that you can wake up every morning and say, okay, I live in Cleveland, Ohio, and the sun doesn't come out in the wintertime. But I know it's behind those clouds.
Oh, it's true. And because I focus so much in the corporate space, I've got such compassion for people who sit in jobs and are miserable, and executives. I sit with so many CEOs, and you know what? They're so miserable because they feel people let them down.
Yeah.
And I've got compassion. I've been an executive, and it's such a hard job. And so I went into this because I wanted to make a difference. And now corporate organizations help get me to coach their people so their organization is better. I mean, come on. Is that not progressive? They don't always know that I'm going to bring love into the workplace, but I do that. That's my gift to you. I teach you how to love each other and yourself in the journey. It's just marvelous, but I never put that in a proposal. Otherwise, boards will probably not sign it off.
Well, I encourage everyone to reach out to you. I'd love to have you back on. We have another show called Grief Belief, and
Ooh,
domestic violence fits grief belief, 110%. That some of us just don't know how to give it up. Or when we do, people think, how did you do that so easily? So stay tuned. I will be in touch with you real soon. And
thank
it
you,
was such a
Karen.
pleasure talking to you, and keep that smile on your face.
Thank you. And thank you for the space and holding it for me. And much love to you and to all your listeners. And may this episode today just touch their hearts.
Thank you again. Have a great day.
I send you love.